Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. You can't. You can't
Yeah.
put a number on values. So what we're working on right now from a numbers perspective is performance management
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the variables in the performance appraisal form. So what do we recognize? So again, in a retail organization, you can fall victim really quickly to just recognizing
Mm-hmm.
sales numbers, attendance, conversion, sort of the typical sales KPIs. So my role has been to layer on the customer centric KPIs to those sales and operational KPIs that already existed in the business. So implementing things like customer feedback tools, employee satisfaction tools, employee satisfaction metrics. One real example would be in the performance appraisal process, allowing store associates to give feedback on their manager and then holding the managers accountable in their performance process, right? So really inside out and bottom up approach.
So it depends on the initiative. They're measured in different ways. Some of them are measured by engagement or kind of those like moment in time A/B testing type things where you say, all right, where are we at right now? Let's launch this. And then let's look at where we're at 60 days from now or 90 or look at this kind of down the road. There's other things that are a little bit easier, especially around like upsell, for example. That's one where we've built out quite a bit around more scaled approaches for how we could take a very small account management team and be able to help more customers. So doing things like one-to-many demos, creating different automated drips so that customers can get what they need when they need it without every time having to rely on a person to write up every email and send everything over manually. So things like that are a little bit easier because I can not only measure the engagement, how if people are attending, if they're continuing to click on things or kind of going back, but I can also see if they bought something. Like that's a good way to see that, hey, this is working if previously people weren't and now they are. Again, churn is a hard one because there's definitely things that we can do within the month, within the quarter to do almost like trigger based type things where you can see, okay, there's a dip here or, something's different with a customer. So you can kind of attack it in different ways. But there's also things that we can do throughout the journey to kind of anticipate if we see that there's certain trends where customer engagement dips or product adoption or utilization starts to dip, we can start to do more proactive outreaches kind of in those phases before it happens. So that's been a lot of what we've been doing. Again, I just joined in May, so definitely still a lot that we're figuring out what is working and kind of how we're measuring these things. But we always start with anything that we're launching. We do from the beginning try to think through, okay, how are we going to measure success? How will we know if we got there? Like, is this a ongoing thing? Is this something that, we're just, is there any endpoint essentially? And many of our things we try to build in periods of time where we can look back and be like, all right, at 90 days, we're going to reconvene and look at progress that we've made and iterate along the way. We have a very fast moving team. So typically we don't make it to 90 days before we start iterating because as soon as we see that something is working, we try to lean into and understand what's working and why it's working. And if something's not working or getting the results that we intended, we pivot pretty quickly. And so while we build in kind of those guardrails, I just candidly, we end up doing it a little bit faster just because what we're doing is really important. We want to make sure that we don't continue to do something that isn't helping or may have a negative impact. We want to make sure that we are adjusting along the way so that it's helping our customers.
Sure. So going back to our three main pillars of focus in customer success at Braze, right? So we had talked about that first customer nurture pillar. So that ties to customer retention and growth. And so we measure success there by looking at GRR and DBNR numbers, right? So, how
And
are
what
we...
does GRR and DBNR mean?
So GRR, yeah, of course. So GRR is again gross renewal rate, right? So we're looking at that, like how much of existing business is retained, right? So this is not looking at upsells or expansions. And then DBNR, right? Dollar-based net retention is looking at expansion upsells as well. So we are looking at GRR and DBNR numbers to get a sense of how we're doing towards our customer nurture, towards our customer retention and growth. So that's that first pillar we were talking about and how we measure success towards that. And then we have the customer adoption pillar, right? So here we are looking at how much of the Braze feature set are customers utilizing towards their goals. And so we have some dashboards in Braze where we're able to track towards entitlements, consumption, and usage related data for our customers, not just pacing wise in terms of how much of their allotment are they using, but as I said, entitlements related usage or entitlements related consumption, which is, hey, they have X, Y, and Z features, but they're only using X feature. They're not at all using Y and Z features. So that adoption number or those adoption numbers are also what we're looking at. And then the customer advocacy pillar, right? So here we're looking at how often are customers willing to perform an advocacy event. So this could range from them being willing to share feedback with us on their experience, provide a sales referral, product feedback, speak on our behalf at events, partner with us towards various initiatives for mutual benefit. And so we are tracking towards how often are our customers willing to do an advocacy event. And in fact, we also have a program called Braze Customer Champions, where if customers enroll in that program, they are rewarded for every advocacy event they do, so that it's very clear win-win. So yeah, that's how we measure success for the advocacy pillar. And then another thing I wanted to mention as well is that our customer health scoring ties all of these components together for a very 360-degree ongoing view of how we're doing with our customers as it relates to retention and growth, adoption, advocacy, and sentiment as well. Just, the CSM's take on, hey, like, how is this customer doing sentiment-wise from or on the basis of the interactions that we're having? So yeah, those are some ways that we measure success.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think this is another opportunity for a lot of people. I think success measurement should always be data-driven. And Etech, now on that vision like we talked about, we identify key metrics that support our vision and our core values. You establish this baseline of where you want to go before implementing the solution. And then you iterate the solution, and then you watch the needle move forward. See, this ensures, because I think the other thing people think about AI and success is it's set it and forget it, like Wow Propel's rotisserie, and of course I'm debating myself.
Showtime Barbecue Grill. I have one of those use all the time.
So you remember that. A lot of the younger people have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about that.
It's great.
You have to consistently optimize performance, right? So just because you set it, you can't let it go. These things are machines like anything, have to be trained, they have to be optimized, right? And then when you do that, what you will see in the success is we'll see, like, as an example, reduced repeat contacts, maybe less channel switching. So channel switching is big. So when we listen to a lot of these interactions, believe it or not, people are calling and saying, hey, I'm calling you because I was on your website and I tried to do this and I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem with the website. So when you analyze that data, that's a channel switch, right? You can give that data to the web team. Hey, there's some errors on the website. And when you give an IT guy, hey, it happened 404 times this week, that's a problem. Once I get 400 times, no. And then the other one we looked at is voice of customer sentiment. So the reason I talk about voice of customer sentiment is a lot of people are measuring NPS. And I'm not against surveys, but I can tell you there's 3 reasons people fill out surveys. So above and beyond, physically impossible on every interaction. You upset me so much that I'm going to complain, or you bribe me with a gift card so I can get off that gift card with something you filled out. So a lot of people who use just NPS are missing a lot of the vote because most of them are 4 to 14% response rates.
Yeah.
So we measure it is by analyzing all of that data. We can theoretically put how that interaction was, either a promoter, a detractor, or neutral. And now you have voice of customer sentiment about really what's going on in the world. So there's some of the things that we use to actually measure the success.
Our North Star metrics has always been NRR as a company. We've always aligned ourselves to the business goals, right? And so those, obviously, from a customer success perspective, and really in order to meet the business goals, there are leading metrics that allows us to understand where are we going to land by the end of a quarter, for example. And so with that in mind, we also do measure value delivery or outcomes. So we'll look at other metrics like usage, engagement, customer satisfaction, to be able to really guide us as to where are we within the quarter. We do have retention and NRR targets. How are we on track to receive or achieving those, basically, and that helps guide us.
And you mentioned your team has quotas. I haven't talked to somebody who has quotas before, so maybe they just bring it up. Can you tell me more about how those quotas work? And you say, as you grow and you scale, right, they're going less and less from revenue generating to just more support and retention. So how does that quota change when you flip the model from to retention, right? How do you evaluate the retention? Is it just how many of their clients they keep, or dive into that a little bit more?
Okay, that's a good question, right? So when we talk about quotas, when they were carrying the expansion number, we are focused on net revenue retention, which is how efficient are we both at retaining customers and expanding our existing customer base. Now we've moved the charter to really just focus on retention so that, as we scale up as a company, as I mentioned earlier as well, we are not losing our focus that retention still is key for us to expand, right? Because if we're losing customers, we lose all the future expansion opportunities that come with that. So that being said, when we look at quota, my team's quota right now is really the retention. They have a portfolio of customers that they have. How many % of the ARR have they retained in a specific period? So like I said, really it's simple math. Let's say at the start of, how much of the ARR has been retained compared to the beginning of a certain period of time?
I think a lot of it has to do with some of the metrics that you track across customer success in general. One, in onboarding, that's really critical. I think that a lot of people track across the industry, but we are looking as well at time to first value or time to first revenue. So like I said, our very big focus this year has been getting customers not only signed with us, but how quickly do they go from a sales handover to CS and helping them implement and go live. And we are really tracking that, and we are trying to see a downward trend in the number of days it takes for us to go through basically the entire sales cycle, get them on a kickoff call, and then how long does it take for us to go from a kickoff call to them going fully live with our product. So that's our first value marker is the live moment. And so at first this took us quite a long time because, again, teething issues with either integration or them not understanding support documentation, or again, figuring out our modes and communications are working. But what has happened is we've gotten tighter, we've gotten better, we've built more processes around this, and we're starting to notice that to go in a downward direction, meaning less days for the first time to value, which is, again, a great indicator that our customers are getting rolling and getting up live with us quicker.
Well, there's a lot of data points for sure. So time to value, we track using our kind of data warehouse that we have. So we're kind of, because we are a commerce platform, I can tell, of course, when the project started, but I can also tell when they do their first transaction through my platform. So we can automate a lot of that. We do also survey our customers. We have in-product end user surveys. That kind of gets my end user persona, which is a lot more about the product itself, right? Mm-hmm. So I have I think our last NPS average was kind of plus 45 or something, which we're really proud of.
Yeah,
it's good. And also if anybody listening to this knows anything about the leisure travel tech space, NPS is usually not very positive at all with the solutions that are out there. So let's just say it's not a very mature software category yet. Yeah. Let's just put it like that in a nice way. And one of the points I'll make just quickly is product. Our product team is KPI'd on end user NPS because it's a reflection of their enjoyment or not so much, or unenjoyment. Is that a word? Let's go with it. Their unenjoyment or disappointment, I guess, with the product. The other surveys we do kind of email surveys that are tailored to different personas at different customer journey stages, which measures kind of the super user, executive sponsor, decision maker sentiment. And that's what the CX team is KPI'd on, because obviously that's measuring their feedback on the customer journey and the experience working with Nezasa, whereas in-product NPS is actually just users engaging with the product. So doing both kind of qualitative and quantitative measurement of satisfaction to two different audiences is a key kind of cornerstone to measure the success of what we're working on.
Yeah, well, I think you need to solve for, the immediate needs of the business first. So if you're hemorrhaging in any areas, right? So let's say that implementations are stalling or really struggling with adoption, you need to focus there, right? So there may be a period of kind of reactive metric improvement that you need to drive. And then over time, I think as the business's growth trajectory changes, if you're going through M&A, right, there's so many different dynamics that come into play that might weigh into the 3 metrics that you focus on and improve. But I think for most companies, it's going to be, did you drive a successful onboarding and implementation and get them to value? Did you drive adoption? And did you drive outcomes, right? If you aren't able to deliver on the initial promise during the sales cycle, then, you shouldn't be too surprised when a happy or a high CSAT customer still churns at the end of the day because you didn't really drive results for their business. So it's not personal, but they can't justify the expense, especially in this market, right? Where we're seeing a lot of consolidation in tech and, executives having to bring a very clear business case to their CFO to be able to justify, incremental spend. So something to keep in mind.
Sure. Well, engagement, of course, is a big one. So how many eyes or how many people are engaging with what you put out there? Things like CSAT scoring and NPS scoring, of course, as well, as you try to just measure how they feel about your product, just as a starting point. Then, of course, you're also looking at actual analytic usage. So they've bought your product, but are they logging in daily? Have they used all aspects of it? Are they just sort of using it solely as this one little piece of the tool, but not ever expanding or trying to learn more about it? So some of those key parts about just how they feel about it, but then also we spend a lot of time looking at, are they really using it and getting the full value from our perspective, and how can we educate them to be able to understand how to do that?
Have you noticed any trends with satisfaction or lifetime or time to value for people who use the product more compared to people who use it less?
So we notice the satisfaction with our involvement. So if a customer, certainly off the bat, if their onboarding experience is positive, they stay longer. We know that. And a lot of that, through my experience, has found that it's the human aspect of how that process went. Mm-hmm. So if they come in, they're onboarded and they feel like they're a number and they're just sending emails and no one's responded, well, they may love the tool, but we're seeing over time that they're not going to feel a connection to your product, to your business, to what you're doing. So from my perspective, what we've seen is tracking that using those analytics and data, also following up with a human connection, saying, hey, I noticed you finally checked out this section of our tool. How was that for you? Really happy to see that. Well, now there's a human aspect to it. There's that level of communication. We find when people feel that we're proactive towards them and their needs and supporting them, that adds to the satisfaction. That's where we see that level of retention. So we try very hard for other customers, regardless of their size, to feel that there is a person on the other side that they can connect with and ask questions.
So I'm a metrics nerd. I mean, ultimately, we have a board meeting today, so I'm all into gross and net revenue retention and how the business is doing. Mm-hmm. Those are key metrics, but I want to look at all of the inputs and the levers that we have to pull. So I'm looking at team member engagement. We have ongoing engagement surveys, but we also do pulse surveys and change the questions over time to find out what's working and what's not. We do this specific within CS because we want to be able to ask specific questions. Where are you spending more time than you should? What's working? What's not working? And what can we rapidly address to improve their effectiveness and experience that then translates into customer experience? So from an internal perspective, we're looking at all of that: sentiment, employee engagement, and feedback. And that qualitative feedback is really important, so that we know where to focus our attention. From a customer perspective, we have a wide range of customer experience metrics. We're looking at time to get a customer launched and fully adopted. So we look at onboarding as well as adoption acceleration. We have milestones at each stage of the journey that tell us whether a customer is healthy or not, and will flag us to engage in certain ways to ensure that we get them on the right track if needed. And we do that all through value realization, renewal, expansion. So we're looking at all of those incrementally. We also have a post-onboarding survey, so we gather insight on what that experience was so that we can improve that experience as well. We'll be launching a deep customer relationship survey in Q3. So we'll look across the entirety of the experience. We do pulse surveys with customers as well, and NPS in the product. So we have a variety of mechanisms to gather that insight from customers. We also look at support data. What are customers reaching out about? What is working and what is not working in that process? So if they're reaching out on how to quite a bit, that's an indicator to us that we need to work with our peers in product on the UI and usability and in product prompts to make it easier so that they can intuitively understand what they need to do versus having to reach out on a how to. If we see consistent queries on particular aspects of the product or the experience with particular aspects or features of the product, then we're surfacing that to either product or engineering, depending on whether it's an opportunity to improve the feature or it's potentially a bug. And so we use that data as insight into what we need to prioritize with our partners in product and engineering. But we also use how we're doing from a response and resolution rate perspective to evaluate, what is the experience of support? And do we need to reconfigure our processes, or do we need to revamp our self-service materials, our support articles? So we measure the views on the support articles and, tie that to what kinds of questions are coming in. And then from a customer enablement and programs perspective, we're measuring the efficacy of the training and best practices that we deliver. And we're gathering input from customers on whether that added value or not, so that we adjust the programming accordingly. So, and I don't even think I covered all of the metrics that we track, but we go deep because we want to understand what levers we can pull and how we can pull them.
I've had so many conversations on this. So NPS is something that to me it serves a purpose as a quarterly or half yearly snapshot. So what do you think about our brand? And too many companies use it as a post-transaction or interaction survey, and they use it at completely the wrong time.
Yeah.
And even here in the Middle East, I literally will phone or interact on an app or phone or send a message or a chat. And they'll say, oh, okay, sorry, can't help you. You need to phone back or call this department. You'll get a survey.
Yeah.
How happy were you? What the hell? So I always like to measure on three things. I'll answer the commercial question in a second. From the customer perspective, first of all, how happy are you with the outcome, the solution, the thing we gave you as an answer? How happy are you with how we made you feel, the experience, and how happy are you with the effort you had to put in? So outcome, experience, and effort. And I ask on a scale of 1 to 5. And I've always thought 0 to 10. Brains don't think like that. It's either okay, 3, good, 4, amazing, 5, 2, 1, bloody awful. And psychologists have proven that. So I have a 1 to 5 scale after every interaction, but we don't send them a survey. We say, okay, thanks for speaking to company X, Y, or Z. Here's a summary of our conversation, just so you can realize we have listened to you. And by the way, if it's an ongoing case, you can track it here. Here's the link. And at any time, you can give us feedback. So if I've just had a conversation with Ben Holland, but Ben's told me something's going to happen tomorrow, I'll wait and give him the feedback tomorrow. And if nothing happens tomorrow, I'll give Ben 1 because he lied, But the trick then is we link all of those feedbacks to the CRM case. So how happy are you with the service you experience? Generic, forget that. It has to be literally linked to the interaction Ben Holland had, and let the customer have control. And I've always put a third button, would you like us to follow up on your feedback?
Yeah.
Tick. Oh wow, and that opens the case, and it is and an interesting thing we've implemented in Batelco, the telco we serve in Total CX, is we have a thing called proactive follow-up, where if a customer has contacted us 3 times the same day, we will listen to the call, look at the chat, look at the email. What went wrong with the first 1 or 2? And also any customer that gives us on our 1 to 5 scale a 2 or 1, we always listen. We don't wait for the feedback. We listen to the call ourselves, and they just give a number and no feedback. So that's how I measure customer experience from the customer perspective. But obviously we have a P&L, so I could be greedy and say I want a margin of 25, 30, 40%. I work on we're a startup, although we're part of a 50-year-old company. As long as I'm making 10% margin, and it's allowing me to add more business, more clients to our bottom line, I'm happy. And 10% is the foot in the door. But obviously, if we make our client win awards, then I'd want to look at that. But no, I'm happy. It's not about making money through margins on a few clients. It's about making low margins on many clients, because we have a reputation then of being the best at what we do.
So for us, we have obviously a number of different indicators, as most organisations do. For us, the way that we run the platform is actually based on the number of matters that people run within the platform. So when I talk about a matter, I mean a legal matter, a case or a deal that's run within the platform. And that could be run by one particular firm as our customer, and then they go about inviting the other side, the other legal teams involved, their clients, advisors, any of the third parties. So it's an area where they all come and collaborate. So our leading indicator is how many masks are people running through the platform. So how much usage are they getting out of it, and how much value are they seeing from their subscription? But we also
that makes sense.
Yeah, but we also know we need to look a lot wider than that. That is obviously our leading indicator. So number of users. So our third parties being invited to the platform, are seeing the value through their clients as well as their own internal users. But also the fairly standard things like, are they referenceable? Can we go to these people for a reference? Are they responsive? Are they coming to our events? Are they willing to give us success stories and provide case studies? So this is something that we're sort of find quite challenging at times, and just constantly wanting to get those different kind of indicators. And I think we're at a crunch point in terms of the size of the organisation, because we do quite a lot of things manually. And we're actually thinking about how we need to try and automate some more of these processes to get those measurements easier for us as a team to be able to work around, but also to be able to kind of report upwards. I think we always need more data. I think that's quite common in a lot of organizations.
Well, that's a great question. I think it's still a work in progress. I mean, we look at metrics like customer satisfaction. In the contact center, we try and weave CX into our quality assurance. So not just, if for those that might not be familiar with quality assurance in a contact center, it often becomes a checklist of the things people did and didn't do. But we have a question in there that says, if you were in the customer's shoes, would you have been satisfied with this interaction? It's such an open-ended question. It could be maybe the agent wasn't friendly, or maybe the agent, this customer asked for something that we couldn't do, and the agent just needed some help being more creative to help them find a solution. So that, we really try and weave CX into a lot of those discussions. It's, when I go back to this AI self-service, that's still kind of a work in progress. We do get metrics around, how many tickets or phone calls were deflected because of the AI, and it's difficult to put a lot of stock in those metrics right now. Some customers get frustrated and hang up, and that may show up as a self-solve. I really want them to get frustrated and contact support so we can watch their journey. We can read about how they interacted with the bot and how they got to a human. But that doesn't always happen. And so the nice thing is, we use for our help center, we use Zendesk, and they keep adding some helpful tools that are helping us be able to see how customers are interacting with the bot. But that's not it's not a concise metric right now at all, as much as I would like it to be. But I hope we get closer to that as we keep working on that.
Yeah, I think a big part for us was really benchmarking first. So it was kind of taking a look at where we are and the trends when it comes to our DSAP scores, our NPS, and our customer ease. They're kind of our three key metrics that we use to measure customer satisfaction at Electric Ireland. So we've kind of leaned into like what are the passions for those? Where were we? Where do we want to be? And kind of how are we gonna get there? Kind of map that out. So we are definitely working to those kind of key metrics with the data. We're also kind of I suppose trying to be mindful to use a mixture of qualitative and quantitative data. And trying to build stories with the data and make it as human as possible. Because I think a lot of the time there's a danger with data that we almost see the customer as a number. And I think this is something that we've been really working hard to try and shift that mindset. That it's not just a number, there's so much more behind that. So really trying to pull in kind of the emotional drivers for the customer to kind of give it a little bit more life and essence and humanity. So I think that's been important with the data as well for us.
So there are multiple standard metrics that customer success teams use to measure success. What I don't like typically is customer success metrics typically revolve around churn and attrition, which is important to our business. But I think it's important to take a step back, right? It's important to define what success is when we start this journey. It's about focusing on the outcomes and the impact that you're looking to create. This could just mean right experiences and impact that makes your customer, like I said earlier, move from being just your customer, but actually being an advocate for you. And I think that is true success for any organization. So we can always spend time around attrition, churn, retention, and all the standard metrics that we've got, right? But at some point of time, it's all about value narration, value creation with your customer, and then converting them from just being a customer to an advocate of yours. And that is where true success lies. And that is what, and sometimes hard to measure, right? But then it's what you would want to get to at some point of time.
Yeah.
Well, measuring success ultimately is how much do your investors get, right? Earnings per share. And well, that's around lifetime value. If you're driving lifetime value, then you're seeking a balance between the short term and the long term. You're seeking a balance between revenue gains and cost to get it, right? Whereas nowadays, we're only looking at revenue. A lot of times we're doing a lot of crazy things to get there just to make the numbers. Come what may, going to make those numbers and then pay for it later. It's ridiculous. It's really hard to keep things on an upward trajectory that way. And therefore, we have to make a lot of sacrifices that are unfortunate. And the biggest sacrifice I see we're making since the pandemic is less value for customers. That is a crazy thing because investors won't stand for lower earnings or revenue month by month or quarter by quarter. They may tolerate it once or twice in a blue moon, right? But not regularly. Employees won't stand for salary static or reduced anytime. They'll look elsewhere. And yet with customers, what have we done? Reduced value since the pandemic. Lower quality, smaller sizes, higher prices. And sure, there are cost of living increases. But frankly, a lot of this is just being thrown up over the fence to defenseless customers who have no recourse. They have to live with it. And so we figure we can get by with that.
Yep.
But also there's some companies doing it just because they can.
You know, you can go NPS score. I've used internal CSAT scores, or actually not internal, but account manager CSAT scores using Likert scales and things like that to get more drilled in. But nothing too confusing or difficult, because if the account manager is doing their job, we're going to have a good pulse of the pain points of a customer and if they're likely to renew. So it's actually a combination of something like your NPS, CSAT, and then, you know, some of the subjective information that we get in our business reviews and things of that nature. So it's a combination of all three.
So success came for us both internal. So we were looking at transformation, right? So we were looking at some internal metrics, and that was really team effectiveness, speed to market. And then externally, it was really around increasing engagement, those retention metrics we were looking at, reducing friction. So what we found was a lot of the jumps that we were making people go through created a lot of friction, a lot of attrition. So we were trying to reduce those friction points. And then we obviously kind of followed up with some VOC, voice of the customer, to try to make sure we were on track.
And when you say that, is that like NPS, customer satisfaction surveys, those sorts of things?
We had a couple platforms we were starting to bring on board and test, and we were trying to actually do that in small markets and then roll that out globally because it was working so well. But we would partner with a couple of different, Qualtrics, for instance, to really help operationalize it.
We measure it through repeat sales. We measure it through CSAT and NPS, and we measure it through cost of service.